that it was from New York, from a reputable dealer. He told me not to sell it because we might give the demon to whoever bought it. Demon? I was speechless. Actually, I was kind of a wreck. After calming me down some, he told me to get a small box and completely fill it with salt, so that nothing of the set was touching cardboard, just salt. And then to take it way into the woods and bury it extremely deep. When I told my husband, he got excited and anxious, telling me, "Do you remember when we bought it? There was salt all drug use. She was clean for 3 months. Travis takes Gail out and dresses her in the nicest things. Gets her hair and nails done. A new pair of heels for a client that night. She's told that he's an international visitor from Europe. That he insists on his escorts being narcotic-free. She'd be meeting him in a suite at the top of the flamingo. When the elevator doors opened up, Gail saw 2 security guards standing outside the door. Apparently, they were almost as tall as the door they were guarding. From the way their clothing hung, it was clear they weren't adorned with bulging muscles, like the regular goons Gail was used to see. But the 2 men standing there were equally menacing in their own right. Both wore matching black suits, dark circular sunglasses, and bowler hats. Neither of the men say a word to her as she exits the elevator. They stay completely silent as Gail's frisked, and every pocket and crevice she has is checked. Then, one security guard beeped the walkie-talkie on his shoulder twice, and the swing doors opened up. Gail sealed close to every penthouse suite, rooftop, mansion, golf course, luxury Las Vegas can offer. It wasn't the suite that had her stumbling on her heels when she walked inside the double doors. In the living room area, the couch had been slid up against the wall, and the large, thick rug that was usually under the couch was rolled up in the corner as well. Where the rug should be is now 4 big blue plastic tarps taped together, covering the living room floor up to the walls. Directly in the middle of the tarp is a hospital bed and an IV and other tubes hooked up to a medical device. The sight made her stop. She wasn't but a few steps into the door, but then she tried to backpedal. She bumped into her client. Gail jumps away in fright, landing onto the blue tarp. The man that was standing behind her walks forward in the dark entryway to better reveal himself under the small chandelier that had decorated the living room. In a thick German accent, he apologized for the scare and introduces himself as Elijah. Being on the floor for her first sight of this man, she describes him from the ground up. He's dressed nicely. He wore expensive loafers under black business pants and a dark cardigan. He was handsome, looked to be in his 40s. He wore the same dark circular sunglasses as the security did. He extends a hand to help Gail up. She accepts his gesture, and the blue tarp loudly crinkles as she stands. The first thing Gail asks Elijah is, "Are you going to murder me?" To her relief, he says no. Her next question is if the doctor said I was a king, and feel the blood being pulled from her veins. Her shoulder muscles begin to ache. Soon she starts to feel overwhelmingly woozy. Gail tells Elijah, "You're taking too much blood. Please, I think I'm dying." Her vision, she can see Elijah appear over her again. He tells her she's not dying. He's not taking all her blood. Growing headache. Gail can barely manage the pain. The straps make it impossible to squirt, and she's grinding her teeth until one of her molars breaks in her mouth. Eventually, it's all too much, and Gail blacks out. She wakes up. Her settings is completely different from what she remembered. She's disoriented, especially when she finds herself in a real bed this time. Still the sweet as a flamingo. Now awake, lying in the bedroom. Gail was weak from the loss of blood, and she was shocked to see only an hour had passed since she'd arrived. Elijah was standing underneath the doorframe of the room, staring at Gail, waiting for her to wake up. Under the covers, she pats her body. Aside from her shoes being removed, she was fully clothed. The bed was comfortable and clean. Elijah, seeing that she's up, quickly leaves the doorway and returns with a platter in his hands. He tells Gail, "You're going to like this." The fog wears off and reality sets back in. Where she is, what's going on. Again, it brings her to tears. When Elijah approaches the bed with the platter, she can hear metal sliding around, echoing the dome container. He sets the platter on her lap, removes the lid to show a plate with 3 large chocolate chip banana pancakes. The metal that she heard clinking around was a fork and knife. Gail says that they were the best pancakes she's ever had. Elijah leaves her to eat alone in the bedroom. When she's done, Gail gets out of bed, still weak, but able to stand on her own without holding a wall. As Gail exits the bedroom, Elijah is nowhere to be found. She doesn't look around for him. Instead, she runs through the living room, avoiding the gurney and medical equipment that's still set up. When Gail gets to the entryway, she grabs her purse and runs out the swing doors. She didn't turn around until she reached the elevator. And when she did look to see if anyone was after her, she saw that the security guards were also vacant from the hallway. The elevator doors closed. Next time they opened was in the lobby of the Flamingo. As the doors slid aside, she was met with the noise of chatter again the floor. She tried to walk with as much composure as she had, as to receive the least amount of attention as possible. There were no mirrors in the bedroom. She had no clue what her appearance was like as she entered the public. Getting outside, she hurried to the parking lot where her ride was waiting. When she got in, she locked the doors and broke down in tears again. The men in the car asked what happened, preparing to go back up there. Gail tells them everything that happened, including the pancakes. One of the men still thinks that Elijah needs to be threatened, but Travis, who's sitting next to Gail in the back seat, tells the men to shut up. Then he tells the other man to drive. During the drive home, Gail feels a hole in her neck. It's tender to the touch. She asks Travis who those people were at the Flamingo, showing him the puncture wound. Everyone's quiet in the truck as they listen for Travis to answer. Even the point of contact for this arrangement, Travis and Hale. He knew in the truck with him were 3 of his closest confidants. Not to sound crude, but to use proper terminology when I say Gail was Travis's bottom bitch, mean girl. He owed it to her to tell the truth. Travis starts by explaining how he met the German client selling guns. Elijah contacted him later, telling Travis that he was coming to the States for a few that's what's the most important part. Sure, Travis, sure. Well, fast forward to the present or later. A month after the flamingo, Gail relapses, gets picked up by the cops, turns informant, and sends a couple members of the biker gang to jail. Then she moves to where she is now, far, far away from Las Vegas. I had a restraining order placed against my first husband after we divorced. His threats made me afraid for my life, and I was terrified he'd return someday to kill me. Robbie was a bad man. His Christian attitude was a mask to hide his toxic behavior. Only at home would he feel comfortable extending his full wrath if I were to displease him. Months went by and I thought my nightmare was over and I could start moving on. My friends that didn't have him blocked on social media told me that he moved out of state. A year would go by with no contact. I began to let my guard down, thinking he'd moved on from me. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Even after I'd sold the house and moved, he still managed to find me. The house I purchased from the sale was a smaller house on larger property. Living by myself, I had no use for extra rooms that I barely used, but I did enjoy having no neighbors. I was able to purchase all of it for less than what my house sold for. I was able to furnish everything exactly how I liked, and I even had a little put in my savings. The first week living there full time, I tried to ignore the jitters new surroundings can present. The settling of an unfamiliar house took some getting used to, but the more I unpacked, the more it felt like home. It took longer than expected to get the last box fully sorted. I spent the first few months using them as tables. Moving always gives perspective to what items we thought necessary to survive day to day. It became more of an aesthetic task since I wasn't expecting visitors. It was the 4th of July and I was working at a bank. A male co-worker asked me out to watch fireworks, and I decided to try my hand at being friends with another human. I wasn't looking for anything romantic, and I let it be known. He was respectful, and I enjoyed getting out to see the fireworks. The city council hosts a big show in the middle of town every year to celebrate the 4th of July and New Year's. I was really enjoying my new life. When he drives me home and we pull down my driveway, I notice a light in my attic is on. And when I remembered, the lights were off. I've only been up there a handful of times to put boxes away, but I surely would have noticed the octagon window glowing above the front door sooner. I didn't let my coworker know how uneasy I was feeling when he dropped me off. I didn't want to invite him inside and ask for his help in any way. When I got out, he didn't get out to walk me to the door. We said our goodbyes in the car. He backed out right after I shut his door. My porch light was off. Another light I could have sworn I knew the position of it. When I left that afternoon, I mindfully turned it on, knowing I'd be coming home late. I fumbled to get my keys to the door. When I get it open, I flip the switch of the porch light, and it blinks on again. So, it didn't burn out. Turning around to face the living room, I can also see down my hallway that leads to the bedroom and bathroom. The hallway is also where the entrance to the attic is, via a pull-down ladder. Not being a dumb lady, I have a concealed and carry permit and regularly practice my shot. It was a good hobby for a single woman to pick up living on her own. After checking my immediate surroundings, I made a sprint to the bedroom to get the pistol. Then I went from room to room, checking to see if anything was out of place, but everything was as I left it earlier that day. Turning my attention toward the attic, I yanked down the trap door, but the ladder didn't fall down. It felt like it was stuck. It took 3 good pulls before the door released, sliding the ladder down with such speed that it chipped the wood floor beneath it. Before I made was prepared to shoot anything that moved, including an unlucky raccoon. I didn't care. Anything that moved was going straight to God. I climbed the wooden ladder and poked my head inside the attic. There's no one up there, but what I do see still puts me on high alert. All the boxes I stored up there had been knocked down. All that was inside now laid in piles on the ground in the attic. A raccoon could have definitely gotten in there and done this. I reasoned this with myself, looking at the mess as more frustrating and scary. I fully pulled myself up into the attic to see if anything's been damaged before turning off the light, giving the piles a close inspection. I tried to ignore the fact that it looked like the boxes were tipped completely upside down, not just pushed over. Old pictures of Robbie and I scattered on the ground. Halloween costumes and holiday decorations looked like they'd been thrown around the attic. The space is a big open area. It would have been easy to see if anyone was hiding up there, because there's nothing to hide behind. When I climb back down the ladder, I can reach the cord for the light, and I tug it off before stepping down the rungs. The ladder reclines back up, and just as the trapdoor seals off the attic, I hear loud stomping footsteps above me. I'm now officially completely scared, even with a gun in my hand. I called the police and waited outside until they could do a more thorough job checking the house. They didn't find anyone. I told them about my restraining order, but all they could do was have me call back if anything else happened. That night, I slept with the phone in one hand and my gun in the other. But the rest of the night was quiet. The morning, however, I woke up to the smell of cigarette smoke. It was the strongest when I walked into the kitchen. I don't smoke. Haven't smelled a smell like that since I stopped living with Robbie. Once more, I retrieved my gun and walked from room to room, checking every edge of the house. All the doors and windows were still locked tight, and again, nothing was out of place. I called in sick to work that day, paranoid that Robbie had found me. He was going to kill me. I spent most of the morning looking out my window at the far, narrow exit of my property. I called my friend and asked her if Robbie's been on social media lately. I explained what's going on, and while we're on the phone together, she used an account that he hasn't blocked her on. She starts by going, on the phone, and I start asking what? Terrified that she found a recent post like, off to kill my ex or something like that. But what she tells me leaves me equally speechless. Holy shit, she says. Robbie died last week. There's a whole bunch of comments on his page saying, I miss you, can't believe this happened, rest in peace. But none of them explains how he died. More research led to an obituary. It was true. Robbie was really gone. After we hung up, something came over me, and I was struck with such strong emotions. I just stood in my kitchen and cried. I knew it was him. Robbie had visited me to say goodbye, and even in death, he tried to scare me. He's never visited since. I'm sure he's in hell now, in a strange way. I like to think I got a sense of closure from it. The feeling of being terrified, unconfident, uncertain. It was the same way I felt all those years we were together. But this reminded me that now I'm a stronger person than who I was. I've never been a believer in the supernatural, but there are moments when you simply can't ignore the presence of certain things around you. Apologies if this story turns out to be a bit lengthy. I moved to a hostel for my studies, which happened to be located right next to a railway line, and the constant rattling noise of passing trains would always disturb us, shaking our windows and such. My room was on the 4th floor. I shared it with 2 other people. I distinctly remember that after about 3 or 4 months, my roommates and I began hearing especially on those hot nights when water was a must. Though, I always felt as if someone was walking alongside me. The haunting experiences continued. One roommate ended up moving out, leaving just two of us. But that prompted me to move to a ground floor with a friend. I felt bad, but outside of offering my other roommate to join, I didn't really have a choice. I needed to get out of that room. I didn't know what awaited me there would leave a permanent mark on my memory. Every day, and I do mean every day, I would catch the sight of a lady standing in the corner of my room, quietly observing me. She never approached me, just watched. She'd almost always disappear the moment I tried to make eye contact. Otherwise, she was constantly in my peripheral vision. These encounters led to sleepless nights filled with lots of confusion and a sure sense of helplessness. I had no idea what to do or who to confide in. My old roommates had all abandoned their rooms. My friends seemed to never be home. And the warden, well, they weren't initially any help either. Not at first. I was stuck. Then, one night, I narrowly escaped a heart attack as I was laying in bed on the verge of falling asleep. I turned over and caught a glimpse of a small child sitting and staring at me. This was new. It was an unsettling sight, one that paralyzed me with fear. I eventually mustered the courage to reach out my hand, hoping it was just a hallucination. But to my horror, the child remained there. Finally, I decided to approach the warden again, this time sharing my experiences in full. Who cares if she thought I was crazy? Maybe she'd be forced to find me somewhere else to live. Ultimately, that's what I wanted. To my surprise, she responded with a calm understanding. She revealed that she herself was not a believer in such paranormal activities. She'd never experienced anything herself. However, she shared a haunting tale from the past. A train accident that claimed the lives of many and severely injured many more on the very same railway line behind the hostel. Since that tragedy, people had consistently reported similar encounters to the warden. She advised me to remain strong, not to let these experiences overpower me. The same advice she'd given others who she promised went on to enjoy their time at the hostel. So that summer, I took her advice. I stopped considering what I saw as scary, and instead, I looked at it as a glimpse into the past. Perhaps I was lucky. After all, not everyone gets to experience paranormal activities vividly. But I do think that when a tragedy like that takes place, it's incredibly possible for spirits to wander. The woman remained in the corner of the room almost until I moved out. I also continued hearing screeching, but over time, I decided that it was the sound of a train on the tracks, combined with the sound of screaming. It sounds awful, I know, but you're hearing these sounds nightly. You really can't help but dissect what they can be. Oddly enough, once I'd really identified what it was, I didn't hear it anymore. I never did see the little boy again. But I often wish that I would have had a different response when I first captured a glimpse of him. Possibly I scared him by appearing so afraid myself. Either way, I hope those spirits found peace, and if their peace was remaining in that hostel, I hope future guests of the 80s have been more welcoming. The UFO crashed in the Spokane Valley. His camera, journal, even his phone were taken. After the report started coming into the office, so did 4 men from the government. They threatened me and the rest of the staff that were there that day to dispose of the story, or they themselves would be disposed of, along with the building itself. Claiming old structures like that burn down all the time. They made it clear that they intended to visit any callers that they could identify. I don't like to be a conspiracy theory nut or anything like that, but the story is being suppressed. Who knows why? I'm not even here to say if it's for our own good or not. I guess I'm just here to was she wasn't shaky anymore. And when she started talking, it was like she was whispering a joke to herself in a really deep voice, and then a quiet chuckle. Seeing her giggling to herself while I'm crying my eyes out really upset me. I thought, is she messing with me right now? How did she have this much strength in her hands to maintain such a tight grip? Then she gets louder. What she was saying didn't even sound like English. The voice I was hearing, it didn't sound like Renee's voice. I could hear two different tones coming from her speech. Her body didn't move when she exhaled with a final loud, deep laugh. Then Renee closes her eyes and falls backwards onto the ground, letting go of my leg. Right when I felt her fingers let go, I pulled my leg back and stretched for the house phone that I previously couldn't get to. While I'm on the phone with 911, Renee's parents get home drunk from the bar, Dawn and Arlette. When they stumble in the door, they're in a fight, yelling back and forth louder than I am on the phone. They either didn't notice or didn't care that someone else was screaming inside their house. They were so focused on each other, Dawn almost kicked Renee in the face as he was stepping around the living room. But when he saw Renee all bloody and stretched out to the floor, he started screaming again and swoops up her limp body off the ground. He hollers for Arlette to call 911. Then he sees me already on the phone. Arlette runs out of the kitchen going, What? Dawn starts yelling in my direction, asking what happened. Now I'm in a ball on the floor, screaming back that I don't know. Dawn tells Arlette they need to take Renee to the emergency room. As Dawn comes back out the front door with Renee in his arms, Arlette is staring back at me with squinted eyes. She points her finger at me and says, What did you do, bitch? She shakes her head at me like she's disappointed, then turns and follows in Dawn's route back to the car. With the front door left wide open, I watch their car back out of the driveway and pull off into the darkness. I was left alone, and that sudden realization took the remaining composure I'd been trying to maintain during the conversation with the 911 operator. They were still on the phone. They heard over the call, still sent an ambulance out to take me to the hospital to get checked out. They called my parents, bandaged up the scratches on my leg. I could hear Renee's parents, intoxicated, arguing somewhere further down in the hospital. When my parents came to pick me up, I told them everything and begged them to walk through the ER waiting room. But my dad said that I wouldn't have to worry about that. He saw both parents passed out on chairs, snoring by the vending machine. When we did exit, we still made sure to get out fast. And that was it. Renee was back at school on Monday and couldn't remember anything that happened. She acted completely normal. And she invited me over after school and made an excuse, and continued to do that until she eventually stopped asking. I was still nice to her at school, but I think she got fit if she really didn't remember anything, even though I don't know how you happened to it, especially having been in the hospital and stuff. Like no memory of anything, and now you're just fine. No, I'm sorry. Renee did turn out normal. We were classmates until she moved during high school. Different friend groups, but she was a normal girl. As it was all happening, I thought to myself, dang, I'm never going to forget this. It's hands down the scariest thing I've ever witnessed.